Welcome back, everybody. Tom, I appreciate you being here. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Good to see you again, too.
I really am looking forward to this conversation, not just to talk to you about this new book coming out in March, but also to just get your input on everything going on across a couple of different markets right now. You know, last time we spoke, Bitcoin was not as high as it is today. So we've seen some changes in the crypto market. We've seen some things happen in the metals. So I'm sure you're going to bring some value to us there. But first, let's talk about this book. I loved the previous book. We talked about that in our other video, the one that you wrote specifically. But this is you and Michael Covel coming together, right?
Yeah, it's Michael and I go back to when he was, I think he was at, might have been 200, maybe it was the 200th episode or something like that. He
Way
was going to
back.
do his podcast way back as he's approaching 1,000.
Right.
And he cranks about 2 out a week, and he's got it all, down to a routine. And he does them auditorially or audible instead of video, because when you do video, as you probably well know, there's a little bit more work editing, and you're essentially creating a movie, and there's sound and sight that you have to marry together and make sure it all works. And I don't think he's not set up for it, and it takes a lot longer, so he can't crank out as many of them. So I think that's probably where some of his
2 a week is still a lot.
Yeah, 2 just doing him audible is a lot. And I tell you, Michael is one of the best prepared question and answer guys I have ever. He is very, very good at what he does, and that's why he's approaching 1,000, and people actually listen to him. Well, along came that episode 200, and he interviewed me, and I guess I was the first sort of name market guy, and also a trend follower, which of course, he wrote the book on trend following.
Right.
And so he looked forward to it. He prepared like crazy. It was just, and I had a great time. It was just wonderful joking around with him. And he's been a Facebook friend and a Twitter friend for a long time. So, we've known each other just from comments back and forth, on social media.
Sure.
And so we go into this interview and we get done with it, and he puts it out there, and within a very short amount of time, it becomes the #1 listened to podcast that he's ever done out of 200.
Wow.
So then he does another one at like 400, and another one at like 600.
Right.
I guess he likes me for the round numbers. I don't know. But then I think he gets to, I think it's 800, if I remember right. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the previous 3 interviews and put them together into one super Basso episode. It's like, I don't know, 5 hours long. I don't know why.
Yep. Something like that.
I mean, I hope I said something interesting to keep people listening for 5+ hours or whatever it is.
Sure.
So then roundabout this last year, we had COVID, of course, so everybody's kind of stuck wherever they were.
Right.
And he throws out this idea to me. He says, Tom, we've got a huge collection of material with all your interviews. You've got all the research papers you've ever published on your website. I've got other interviews that relate to what you talked about in terms of trend following and risk control, position sizing, all sorts of stuff. What do you think about combining that together in one giant book? So transcribe all the interviews, add in additional good interview. He had even recorded, unbeknownst to me, and he admitted it then, he had taken a tape recorder into a talk I had given in 1995 at a managed accounts reports. Yeah, you're probably not that old, are you?
I was born in 1995.
That's
crazy. So he comes into the meeting with a recorder, records you, and then is bringing it now back in 2021 for this book.
It was some talk I gave to this huge group, and he was out in the audience, and I didn't even meet him then. He just recorded everything I said. So
that's amazing.
So he's got a lot of material and a lot of things that I've said, and and during the interviews, it struck me that he's asking questions all the way back to when I bought mutual funds as a paper boy and 12 years old, and all these stories from my early trading years and all that. And I started thinking, if we put that all together into one place, it's the closest thing I'll ever have to a biography on my life, because it covers everything about trading, but there's lots of side stories and all of that.
Sure.
And then, in a brilliant move, he asked me to reach out to people that have known me for a long time and write little things about their knowledge of, who I am and what they, if I'd helped them over time or whatever. So he got an outpouring of a whole bunch of different letters, but the one that was the, the big winner was my wife wrote the foreword now
Wow.
and entitled it "Living with Mr. Serenity."
That's
And
awesome.
and it is for me, it's worth the price of the book. I just laugh every time I read it. It is
That is awesome.
she's very on point and very humorous, and nails me to a T.
Oh,
Uh,
I bet.
uh, and So that's going to be your forward, and it's made it through publishing. We've had several different edits. It's been quite the process, because apparently when I speak, I don't use punctuation or any of these other little things that when you're writing you have to have in there correctly. And when they transcribe it, I don't know about the
It all
initial
looks like one
transcribing, but
sentence.
yeah, they just tried to keep up with me talking, I guess,
Yep,
or
yep.
Michael talking. We had to do a lot of cleanup, but
Got it.
hopefully, and we did a few things where I might go off on a tangent and come back, and it just didn't read right. So we had to do a lot of editing in that. But it's basically the crux of it is going to be the Super Basso episode, which has all these different things with lots of stories from Michael about how the various friends and followers on Twitter and stuff will ask him this or that, or say things about what, complain about some of the things he's saying,
Interesting.
and he has some tongue-in-cheek comments about how people just don't realize that it doesn't need to be more complicated. And listening to me talk and reading the book, you'll see how simple I've tried to make it. And yet, as you know, you sort of have to master yourself. What you do every day might be almost, if you explained it in detail to someone, fairly simple and almost trainable, but they've yet to be tested with the discipline and the mental control that they need to do this simple thing over and over again flawlessly. And even if I do any day trading, I think I probably made about 7 or 8 trades today and came out nicely profitable on the day. But I had 2 trading errors that I just didn't get the stop pushed to the right spot because I got distracted just slightly by some other screen that I was looking at, an email or whatever.
Sure, sure.
And it's really tough to do it and be a machine, but you almost have to try to train yourself to do that. And I think the book is going to be very interesting because it gets into a lot of great stuff. And so it's a combination of a whole bunch of different things all put into one giant book. And I've read through it all.
I was going to say, so have you seen the final copy? Have you
I haven't seen
previewed
the
the final?
final copy. I saw the final edit
Okay.
that then
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
disappeared
close to,
into,
close to.
yeah, close to. I have a
Yeah.
good sense of what it's going to be.
Is the on the cover of the book, is the cowboy hat a symbol for enjoy the ride? Is that how that ties in? Is that what
No,
that is?
no, you know what that was? That was just
Tell me.
it was a day where we were up at our mountain home, and it was
Okay.
around the 4th of July. So I always
Okay.
pull that shirt out for the 4th of
Yep,
July
yep. I know
because
what shirt you're talking
why
about.
not? And it's a cowboy shirt actually that I
Yep.
bought at a Western wear store in town in Payson, Arizona.
Okay. Okay.
And so I had it on, and we were going to be going to this country music oriented dinner/dance over at one of the clubs across the street. And so my wife was going to get her country stuff on. I thought I'd wear my cowboy shirt with the American flag since it was the 4th of July. And since it was going to be early enough, I decided to go with the lighter colored hat. I have several cowboy hats. And that was my outfit for the party, basically.
That's
And so
awesome.
I was just sitting there, standing there with my arms creased and leaning up and talking, and Brenda decided to take a picture. So
There it
caught
is. And
caught me
the
with me
iconic cat
smiling.
lives on the cover now forever.
Yeah.
The idea of this book, would you say it's really to drive home the point that not only is trading, it can be as simple as you want it to be, but really just trend following alone isn't a super complicated process. And I feel like through your experience, you're kind of showing how it's almost repeatable, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
the underlying idea?
Well, and it applies to a lot of different markets, and I hope I drive home the point in spades that sizing your positions is very important. I wrote a book on that topic about
Yep.
a year or two ago. I get
Hmm.
2 years, I guess now.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's junior high school math in the book that I put out.
Right.
And I charged everybody $10 just so I could cover my costs of the electronic store that I've got to pay to do that. So shouldn't be an excuse for anybody to not be able to buy that book, really.
Of course. No, definitely.
But it's simple math. It's divide and multiply.
Right.
It's really not that hard, and
What do you,
I still use it. Even when I'm day trading, I size my positions based on the volatility of that particular market at that moment in time and the type of risk I'm taking on in the trade. And then I have a little matrix I glance at real quickly. And, and it says I should do X contracts or I should do Y contracts or whatever.
sure.
And I have buttons and I just start hitting buttons and sets the trade up and off I go.
Do you
It's pretty
feel
easy.
that? No, and the way you break it down is always so calm, Mr. Serenity, so easy to hear and so easy to understand in that sense. But in the moment, we know that most traders lose money, right? So it's easy to explain and easy to talk about, but not so easy to actually act on every day. And I'm sure you've seen like hundreds of traders, if not thousands of traders that have come in and then failed. And do you
Mhm.
think that that problem is rooted in position sizing and really risk management? It's not so much a trigger signal or a system. It's really just the sizing that they're doing over time.
Yeah, Ed Sequoia had an interesting saying that I think Tharp also picked up on. The psychologist
Hmm.
Van Tharp.
Hmm.
He says the markets always have a way of giving you what you really want,
Mm.
and a lot of people. I think Tharp made the statement one time, which just floored me, that 40% or so, 30 to 40% of the professional money managers of the world are certifiable for Gamblers Anonymous. Okay,
Wow.
so that's one whole problem. You got a bunch of gambling going on, and we're actually trading the markets because we can't get to the casino today. I
Right.
can go on my computer and get to a casino.
Right.
So I'm into the thrill. I'm into the excitement. I'm into the allure of big money and all the things that that can buy me. And so what you're trying to get is excitement, and the market is happy to provide that. It can also provide that excitement in the way of losses because your objective and your your whole mentality is not structured about I'm in these markets to produce a profit. It's a business. It's a job. It's work. It's studying, back testing, and figuring out sizing algorithms that are going to work for you. It's making sure you have enough capital. I would
Right.
say that combination of gamblers syndromes, undercapitalization, too large a position sizing, and not having a complete plan are why most people fail.
Those
It's
four things right
always
there.
one of those four things will probably be very prominent
Yeah, and
when
the only
you
one that I would say I'd add in there is probably, even if I've seen a lot of people have a really specific plan, they go through details of it, they'll sometimes break the plan, even if it's back tested and proven that it'll work. Psychologically, they have this obstacle where they end up either oversizing, like you said, or over trading, and then that leads them to breaking that edge that they had.
correct.
When you go back, I mean, as long as you've been in the market, was a trading edge an idea that you had at the beginning? Was that something that you knew you needed? Was something that you could do that was like, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because I'm supposed to be an engineer and I have a lot of math background,
Right.
and I had no idea when I was trading futures what an
Really?
edge. I'd never even heard the term until I
Wow.
started helping Tharp out with some conversations and helping some students that he had at some of his seminars. That's the first time I ever heard of a thing called the
Really?
edge.
That's crazy.
I was just trying to figure out how I could be systematic and let my profits run and make a lot of money on those and stay out of trouble the rest of the time. And it turns out that that would mathematically give you an edge, but I never thought of it in those
You didn't think
terms.
about it that way. Wow,
No,
that's so interesting.
I do
And it's
now, but I
is it
didn't.
because are you an ultimate, like, are you underlying at who you are? Are you an optimist? Like, do you see markets and things always going up? So as long as you have that optimism in a sense, or no?
No, I don't see it up or down. I'm very
True, because you'll trade
binary
short.
with my direction. I go short all the
Right,
time,
right,
and
right.
the last few days I've made a ton of money on natural gas. It's been plummeting. Today it went up again, so I got hit a little bit. But no, I go both directions, so I don't really care. I'm ambivalent towards direction. But what I do see is that if markets were extremely stable, as in prices don't move anywhere for years and years and maybe decades on end,
Okay, okay.
there would really be no job for me, the trader. There's no reason for me to take on risk of the marketplace when, if the prices are staying the same, there is
That's the
no
point.
risk,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah,
So there's got to be risk. There's got to be risk to the downside. There's got to be risk to the upside.
right.
If you're I don't know, let's back in the days when Southwest Airlines was hedging their fuel prices, fuel going up would be a risk to their business. So purportedly, they bought a whole bunch of futures or future contract
As a hedge
these
against
as a
fuel price.
hedge, right?
Wow. Okay,
And
interesting.
and and they were hedged ahead. I had heard something like 2-3 years or something. So they
Wow.
they were cleaning everybody's clock in the airlines industry with profit margins because
Because of that.
they could keep their rates way really lower than the rest of the airlines could even run to, and they were making a profit on it, and the
Right,
other
because of their
airlines
hedge.
are
Wow, that's
losing money.
crazy. That's
So
crazy.
they're just taking over routes and growing, and they got no problems now.
Right.
That has since run out. All their hedges are no longer uh,
Really?
they
Okay.
don't the ones that they had put in place at that point have run out. Now at
Interesting.
this point it's a whole different problem with COVID,
Sure.
and everybody's now been able to buy cheaper oil right now. So I don't
Right.
know that they have quite the competitive advantage that they did. But that's a story where markets going up is actually a risk to the business. So it can
Right.
be. But the thing is, if markets go up, let's say crude oil goes from 50 to 100,
Sure.
that might hurt the uh, the oil or the airline industry. It might help an oil producer.
Right.
And to me, as a trader, I'm just willing to take on the risk of extraordinary movement away from somebody who wants to hedge it or is speculating to the other direction. And
Sure.
I'll take on that risk. And if I do it consistently, and you make the assumption that the markets are always either going to move up or down over time, there's going to be periods where markets are disrupted.
Right.
That's where my profit's made. And I
Right.
got to be in on that trade. I have to be disciplined. I have to trade like 20 different things. And I never know which one is going to be the one that really is the big profit. But I have a high probability, it seems to me, over time of having something be that one market that makes the big move this year. And of
Right.
course, the thing about 2020, with COVID crash and then the recovery after, and then the
Hmm.
sideways and the
Hmm.
election, and we're disputing the election, and there's been so much news-driven stuff this year that I mean, take your pick. There's all sorts of markets have made huge moves, and huge moves mean there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of potential for reward. So if
When you
you can
think
be
back to
disciplined.
2020, speaking of like the past year with all of the news driven events, is there any trades that are trend following ideas that stick out to you as like a great trend of 2020 that you'll remember?
Well, Palladium made a lot of money earlier in the year.
Yeah, you mentioned that
Uh,
before.
uh, that sticks out as massive. Stocks to the downside, stocks were down 35% at the COVID crash.
Right.
And I hedged my ETF portfolio. I sold off about, I think I was down to about 45% or so
Wow.
invested
Okay.
and hedged on top of that. So I actually ended up becoming net short, which helped that.
Yep.
Um, with the crash happening and everything so crazy, long bonds was a good trade.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about.
All the crypto people that listen to this, Tom, are going to be like, Tom, crypto, Bitcoin, what? You're forgetting Bitcoin.
I'm not forgetting it. I just really don't care. I
Exactly.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Crypto uh, is an interesting concept, and I think that eventually there are going to be forms of electronic money in the future. It's unavoidable. I mean, physical printing of paper and
It's right.
carrying
It's
stuff around
prehistoric. Right.
is it's yeah, that goes back to before you were born.
Right.
And in today's world, there's the Apple Pays, and there's the Amazon Pay,
Credit
and there's
cards and
the
everything.
credit
Yep.
cards, and
Yep.
you hardly. I mean, yeah, I rarely go to an ATM anymore.
Right.
There's almost. I mean, if I win uh, a cash tournament, on a Monday afternoon or something with the guys playing golf, that $50 or whatever I make, probably keeps me in cash for the next month or something.
Right.
I don't use a
Right.
lot of cash. I mean, even when you buy a drink at the club after the round, and what do? You sign it. It goes on
Right.
your account. You just don't
So you think
need
like,
cash.
yes, digital currency is coming, but Bitcoin to you is
Yeah,
still, it's not an
I
actual
think there's,
commodity, right? It's really
yeah.
not.
Well, here's the thing: to be both an investment and a way of paying your bills, you'd have to have a couple different things happen. First of
Okay.
all, to be an investment, it's got to have stability and lack of ability to have, there's got to be custody of the assets. You have to have confidence that wherever you're doing your wallet as a cryptocurrency is going to
Yeah.
be stable and will be
Right.
there and won't just sort of shut down for no reason.
Sure. Could be a
And
huge issue.
so that's one thing. The
Yep.
other thing is examine if you are I don't know, I guys see in the picture, I get the dictionary on the desk over there.
Mhm.
Uh, Say you're a bookstore
Okay.
and you've got to price a whole bunch of things in Bitcoin. Well, when Bitcoin's gone up and down like
How do you do that?
3,024 hour period over a weekend,
Right.
and it's gone from like 22 to 27 in the last 5 days or something like that.
Sure.
How do you price it?
Right.
Do
You
you
can't. That's a
so
great point.
so? I mean, you got this barcode on there. Do you have some kind of central computer that is tied to, I don't know, dollars or gold, and then it reprices it in Bitcoin
Right. It's
like
weird. Right.
during the day? If you
Right.
buy it in the morning, it's
Cheaper than it is in the
we're going to
afternoon.
use 25,000 for the price, and in the afternoon it's gone to 27,000, so you don't have
Right.
to pay as many of them for the same book.
Right.
It's just
Doesn't
be
make
a
sense.
I don't
Utility there is
it's
off.
as more players come in and as things slow down and it has some value to it, then I can see it being a replacement for the dollar, but I just don't see it's very practical at the moment
I
yet.
mean, because even like the big news is all these bigger institutions like Michael Saylor's company and MicroStrategy, I think it's called, and Mass Mutual bought 100 million. But
Sure.
when you look at Michael Saylor is the outlier. Look at like Mass Mutual, look at other like
Right.
hedge funds, Paul Tudor Jones. The amount of
Right.
their overall portfolio hedged into this is very, very small.
Tiny
Yes.
little bit.
Tiny. It might sound like 100 million, might sound like a lot to some people, but it's nothing to these companies, to these funds. So I
Exactly.
think it's still showing, like I saw something on the internet today. It's like, are we the early adopters? I don't even think we're there yet. You know what I mean? It's still so new. Cause again, I look at it. I think you actually said this to me last time we spoke about it's a trade. And I think Steve Burns even mentioned this to me when I talked to him. He's like, you have to look at everything as if it's a trade. And that's how my mind
Right.
is programmed. So I was in Bitcoin earlier when we talked at like 4,000 and 7,000, and I was out at 12 when I saw the breakdown that I was like, hey, I'm 4 to 12. It's a good trade. I'm going to take this. Now, some people would be mad that they didn't sit from 12 to what it is now at 26. But my mindset is always just one trade at a time kind of thing. So I look at this Bitcoin stuff and these companies dumping all their money into it. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what if it does come down and it stays down? What if Mass Mutual gets in, or Northwestern Mutual now, they want to follow and they get in today and in 2 months it's lower? Aren't they going to be
I,
pissed?
I never trust our government totally.
No.
What's to say? Who's to say that the U.S. Treasury just doesn't completely come in and shut it down?
Right.
There's
Absolutely.
no reason why they couldn't try to do that
I
if they
actually had a
decided. Yeah.
conversation with a guy named Mark Moss. He's on YouTube. You would like his channel. You should check him out. And he talks a lot about the war on cash. And he was saying,
Mhm.
and he's a big Bitcoin guy. And he talks about these central bank digital currencies where they're being developed and tested all over the world. He's like, this could come in and really sweep things out. And I agree. This could come in and that could be what we see, where
Right.
there's an exchange from dollars to a federal bank coin or something like that. It will be an interesting next few years, to say
Well,
the least, when it comes to currency.
something happens like that, and you have a central bank competing with a Bitcoin. Bitcoin drops 50% overnight.
Bingo. Right. And at the same time, something I wanted to touch on was just your thoughts on, again, like I said to you, measuring the dollar. So what Mark said to me was that the dollar index to him is just a measure of the dollar to other fiat currencies. So really what we should be looking at is CPI, is the value of the dollar and how it can buy things. And if you look at that, like the value of the dollar is just, I mean, it's lost almost all its value since it was even created.
Right.
So how it's like this curve you see where it drops steep in the beginning and it teeters off very thin to the end, but it still has a little space to go. At what point does that just hit zero? And do you ever see that happening? Do you ever see the dollar index going to 20 and then it's just 20 and the US dollars are worth nothing? Is that it even?
Yeah, the mathematical term is asymptotically
Yeah.
approaching
Right.
the x-axis. It never quite reaches it,
Hmm.
and I would say, that's sort of like your ability to become the best trader in the world. You only asymptotically get better and better. You
Right.
never
Exactly.
arrive.
It's just inverted
I'm
of what we're
still
talking about.
learning stuff as
Exactly.
at my 68 years of age. Um, I would say that it never approaches zero as long as the country is alive. Uh, that being said, there's a lot of worrisome things happening out there. I don't like the spending of a couple $1 trillion just to try to stimulate. I think that's a negative to our country. I think it'll slow the recovery down rather than help it. Um, with all the fine economics guys that want to disagree with me, I would point to the behavioral economic side that says, and what we really need to have is people working and generating private uh, profits and having employees and paying salaries and all that. That is what is required to make the economy go. Taking money from one place and sticking it in another does not make the economy grow. It
It's
just
just
gets in the way of people's motivations to
exactly.
hustle and to create a business and to do
Yes.
things.
It kills
So,
innovation. And that's
yeah,
we were talking about this the other day, me and my girlfriend Riley, just how the cities like New York and in California where a lot of people are leaving, I don't think they realize how much innovation they're killing by literally driving the money away. We saw that
exactly.
New York lost $34 billion already in tax revenue from the people that are leaving at
Right.
least.
Hmm.
So I think that killing innovation, you're killing tax dollars, and then you're putting it in a situation where majority of people are hurting so bad they need some type of handout, and then that handout creates control, and it's just not a good situation. You know what I'm
No, it's
saying?
not. And so you start the other side of the issue then, or
Yeah.
if you go further down the line,
Mhm.
you got places like Texas and Florida and even Arizona. We're doing pretty well.
Yep.
You've got a lot of different, South Dakota has stayed wide open the whole
Yep.
time. Uh, there's been a lot of places that have good economies going and are doing just fine and have lived within their means and have not shut everything down. And they're dealing with COVID. And yeah, I'm sure they've had you got some people dying. You got, whether it's of dying of COVID alone or dying of COVID on
And
top of
obesity and other
asthma,
things,
or
right?
yeah,
Right.
all the comorbidities out there. That's another whole
The average
debate
person
that
that
we
dies
could have.
2.6 comorbidities or something like that. It's crazy. But yeah, we could that's a totally
Exactly.
different, right. Keep going.
So,
Sorry.
so did they really die of COVID, or did they die, or they would have died of a heart attack
Right.
if you just gave them another month? But the COVID came in and pushed them over the edge.
Right.
Uh, so the greatest defense against COVID is basically being your age and staying in shape.
And healthy and sunshine. Yep, 100%.
Yeah,
That's it.
getting
And no
sunshine,
news network is
vitamin D.
talking about that, Tom. No news network is saying go work out, go get healthy. Nobody.
One
They're saying
one of
stay
the No,
inside.
then it's the opposite. They're saying to shut the gyms down,
Right. It's
so
crazy.
people get less healthy and have more capability of having COVID affect them. So it doesn't make any sense to me. But and I've looked at the numbers every which way I can. The
Yep.
CDC data is
Yep.
god awful. I think they've mislabeled a whole bunch
Awful.
of stuff, and I've tried to wade through it with spreadsheets, and I can only get so far.
Yep.
I think I may be wrong on this, but when we look back at 2020, a year or two in the future, when the 2020 detailed death certificates get really, really analyzed, I think you're going to see that total deaths in the United States during 2020 is actually going to be slightly less than it was in 2019. Total all reason
I
deaths.
saw that. I
You
saw
know,
you tweeted that a couple of weeks ago. Yep.
I think we're almost to the end of the year. What I've been able to get out of the data seems to indicate that we've had less deaths
Right.
rather than more, and yet
Crazy.
we shut down a $20 trillion economy
And
for a
and
year where we have less deaths than we normally do. You got to be kidding me.
but
That
magically
is,
the flu is gone too. If you look at
yeah,
some of this data too, they're saying
exactly.
it's gone. But one thing you did mention that I want to touch on, the idea of the stimulus printing, the vaccine coming, right? These things could be seen as good news for the dollar, right? Or would that be potentially negative? It's hard to
I
interpret news like that for the dollar,
I
right?
actually don't think it's positive, because if we're
Really?
spending that and other people are not,
Okay.
then it's really hurting our economy, and it's hurting our treasury, and it's running up our debt.
Yeah.
And at some point, if you're Japanese or Chinese or wherever, who's buying this debt?
Right.
I mean, we can buy it ourselves, but with the interest rate so low, it gets to the point where nobody wants to buy this stuff, and we're spending like drunken sailors. And remember that the trade in U.S. Treasuries is another form of currency trade. If you're, a Brit and you want a U.S. dollar, you could either buy the U.S. dollar as a FX trade, or you could just buy a bunch of U.S. Treasury bonds and you would own dollars that way too. So
Right.
frequently you'll see the U.S. dollar and U.S. Treasuries kind of pair up pretty nicely. And what I'm seeing right now is the Treasuries are on a down move. Interest rates are trying to creep higher. Less appetite. Most recent Treasury auction, was it today or yesterday, came off very poor. So higher interest rates there. People
Interesting.
didn't people didn't want the Treasuries.
So
Well,
not good news
are
for the
they?
dollar, really.
Well, yeah, I would say that that's probably not great news for the dollar, because if they don't
Right.
want Treasuries, they probably
Right.
don't want the exposure in the dollar. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
there's some insurance companies and people inside the U.S. that would be buyers of treasuries.
Right.
So okay, I can understand that, but in terms of the total sovereign debt of the world, uh, if, let's say, Japan or somebody is not doing wild stimulus packages, and the U.S. is, and they're not balancing their budget, they're not even close anymore, then nobody even talks about it anymore. You just kind of wonder where it all ends up. You end up kind of upside down. We're already way over. We have more debt than we have GDP,
Way over.
way over, and climbing.
Right.
That's At some point, that's not good.
It's a funny word to use. It's a funny topic to use the word budget around when you really think about it, because what is a budget? You're supposed to stay within the budget. We haven't stayed within the budget in a long time. It's like, why
Yeah.
even call this a budget? This is just a spending sheet. You're just writing a wish list at this point. You know what I mean?
There's been some years over the last decade, quite a number of them actually, where Congress has not even produced a budget.
Really? I didn't know
No,
that.
and they're supposed to by law, but they
Wow.
don't.
Yeah.
They
And that's
just go
where
ahead and just keep spending.
it does get weird, and that's why when I think 50, 60 years from now, what is the value of a dollar? Like, what does it, because if you go back 60 years ago, it got you a lot more than it got you today. Do we see this flipping around and then all of a sudden us going back to how it was in the 40s and then in the 60s?
I
I
don't.
don't, I
Sadly,
don't.
I hate to be depressing about it,
Right.
but I
It's not, we just have
I,
to
I
prepare.
liken it to a train going down a track towards a bridge that's out ahead.
Yeah.
And if you look at any one politician in Washington or even the state governments, it seems as though there's groups of them that want to slow the train down, but they're not turning it around. And the other ones want to put their foot on the gas and spend more and get to the bridge that's out faster.
It seems that way. That is a really good
Nobody,
analogy.
nobody is saying, wait a second, we got a bridge out ahead. Let's put on the darn brakes and hit the reverse and get back away from this thing. Nobody is saying that.
Do you think for the future of like your trading careers I'm sure you see yourself trading into the next couple of years, do you think that it'll you're like, I might want to play more golf. Do you do you think that it'll ever get to a point where trading as a business would be unsustainable because of potential taxes that they are going to try to impose on us?
Well, certainly if you want to call it day trading. See, to me, trading involves buying and selling over whatever time period you want. So I don't
Sure.
care if you're buying an ETF to hold it for the next decade,
Yep.
and you're eventually probably going to sell that. You're going to die, and your estate's going to sell it. Somebody's
Right.
going to
Right.
sell it. There's a
Yeah.
buy and there's a sell. That's a trade.
Yeah.
Now, in your terms, you're much shorter term on some of the stuff you do, but
Yep.
and I was doing some day trading today while I was sitting here doing other things
Hmm.
at the desk. So if I'm sitting at the desk all day and I don't have any golf in my plans or a workout, I had to be here for your interview and
Yeah.
podcasts.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and fire up the one of the screens over here that I can, watch and do that. So in terms of the fast day trading, if they start doing things like transaction tax and all that,
Right.
it's going to make it more and more difficult to pick up that enough profit to pay for all the costs of the transaction. And
Right.
the cost of the transaction comes down to three things, really. There's the slippage on your trade over what would be a perfect indicator. Like if you have an indicator that like a Keltner band, and when it hits that band, you're supposed to get the fill.
Hmm.
Okay, but do you get that fill? No, you get a
Right.
little bit a slippage. So that's one cost. The other cost
Sure.
is brokerage commission, which has gotten close to zero on many things.
Yep. Yep.
So that's very minimal usually. And the
Yep.
last thing could be various taxes, NFA fees, the various fees that they put into each transaction.
Right.
If you're trading futures, it'd be National Futures Association
Sure.
fees. If it's stocks, you probably have a NASDAQ fee in there
Right.
someplace.
Right.
New York State keeps threatening to try to tax transactions, and
Right.
the New York Stock Exchange says, "Well, then we'll become the Texas Stock Exchange, and
Right. Real
bye
quick.
bye, and
Right.
we'll see you later." And so all of that has to go into every trade. So if you're making $100 on the trade and you start paying more and more, how much is left, and you got to pay all of that stuff plus take the loss on the losses. So it
Yep.
starts skewing everything. Your edge starts becoming harder and harder to maintain.
Because you're like trying
So
to overcome fees and taxes. No, for sure.
yeah, the fixed overhead is hard to overcome. So now you have to start stretching out your time periods. Now you're taking overnight risk.
Sure.
All sorts of
Would
other issues come into play.
would trading with a prop firm, which has become a more popular thing, potentially avoid some of those fees maybe? Because maybe the prop firm can lower the fee for you, or maybe because you're, I mean, I guess it depends on how the prop firm is paying you, where you wouldn't have to pay capital gains tax maybe on the profits if you're getting a profit split and they're just cutting you a paycheck, you know what I mean? Maybe you'll
Yeah,
be taxed differently then, so you could save some money in that way maybe.
yeah. And if you're trading forex, remember that foreign exchange is not the same as a security or a futures
Sure.
contract. So
Right.
right there, you have a lack of ability for any one person to, or any one state or any one government even. I mean, if I'm trading a US dollar against the Japanese yen, you got the US dollar on one side of the trade, you got the Japanese government on the other side of the trade, essentially. Neither one can control that transaction between two international banks. Nobody has control of the other side of the transaction. So it's really
Right.
hard to see where they could do very much about it.
That's true.
Um, and so I'm not too worried about FX
FX, no. But
as
if
in,
anything,
but
crypto, you could see them cracking down on too, like you mentioned earlier. They could definitely crack that down. They've been trying to.
they could try. Crypto's got that feature of being sort of in
Anonymous
the
or
in the
whatever.
in the
Right.
internet. So
Right.
it doesn't really have a domicile to speak of. It's not in New York State. It's not in
No.
Texas. It's not anywhere. So
It's
it's
right.
hard to wrap your. If you're a regulator, it's very hard to wrap your head around it. Except to say, at some point, you might just say we're not going to allow U.S. citizens to trade Bitcoin anymore. And I don't know how they'd enforce that.
Right. That'd be
Uh,
an interesting it would be an interesting day on Bitcoin Twitter to see how everybody reacted to that. You and
yeah,
me
it
would just
would.
be scrolling through watching it like, what the hell?
Yeah, it would be weird, but
So
yeah, but that's kind of where I see it. I don't like the talk of transaction taxes.
mm-mm.
I think the most fair, from a behavioral economic and building a great economy standpoint, the fairest form of taxes to where the wealthy pay more and the poor pay less, which gives you that graduated scale, is simply a flat tax.
Right.
And right now, a flat tax in the US, based on how much revenue has been created for the various taxes that we have, corporate and individual, is somewhere in the 18 to 20% of your income.
Right.
Get rid of all the other nonsense. Fill out the postcard. I made this much times
Yep.
point two. This is what I owe. Done.
Yep.
You just put a whole lot of CPAs and lawyers out of
Out of
work. You
business.
got
Out of
you
business.
basically get rid of about half of the IRS or more, because it's
Right.
kind of hard to screw around with something so
There's
simple.
not a whole
So,
lot of admin people that you need to pass it to, and everybody's just paying a
no,
flat rate. Right.
right.
Exactly. That's true. That's a good
And
point.
then everybody's paying their exact fair share of what they make.
I
And the
wonder
more
why
you
we never
make,
did that. You know what I mean? Considering we are, I mean, the United States is formed
I'll
because we
tell
fled taxation. Why didn't we
you,
just say flat tax, if anything?
well, when we started out, we didn't have any.
Right. Right.
This is way before you were born, but
No, we started
there
taxes because of World War One, right? That's where taxes first came in, and we
had to
did pay
pay.
the war back, right? We
Yeah,
did, and then they
we
just
did.
kept them.
Yep. And they said, oh, this is a good deal. We can control
Right.
all this revenue and pick off some here and there. Now, the reason that taxes are so complicated is you're always trying to, if you're in Congress or you're president, you're trying to manipulate the system to benefit your political advantage.
Always. Right.
And so if you're, I don't know, purporting to help the poor, and you can give some credit for, I don't know, families that have more children or whatever. I mean, all these different credits,
Sure. Sure.
different deductions. If you're trying to help the price of real estate, then maybe you get a deduction for your mortgage interest.
Right.
Uh, when reality, if you just stepped away from the tax side of it and said, all right, I've got a house, it's going to go up at a certain value, and it's going to cost me X percent to take a loan against that house to put this much up as a down payment and have that much of as a loan. Payments are going to be this, and I don't get any deduction for any of it. And I got to decide, is this a good deal for me or not economically?
Right.
And I think if you did it that way, the housing booms of, was it 2008,
Yep.
wouldn't have happened.
Would not have happened. Right.
Some of it right now might not
Yep.
be happening. People would be much more reasonable and say, renting isn't totally bad. I don't have
Right.
any of the responsibilities. I don't have that debt, and I have a better cash flow personally. And you'd look at it like a normal business decision. What
Right.
happens with the taxes we have in this country, it seems to me, is it's so complicated. Some people don't even know the
No.
effect
No.
on their taxes. They don't know what's deductible. I think car loans are no longer deductible, but home mortgage is. And
Right. They change it all the time. Up
uh,
until
every
2018,
year,
entertainment was deductible every
and
year.
now it's
Some
not.
new
Yeah,
rules, some yeah. And it is interesting to think about how many CPAs and government jobs that does keep in business. Whereas if you just taxed everybody at 20%, I wonder how much money that would generate versus how much money they say they generate with the current system. Is it a huge difference? I don't know.
I think you generate more because you get rid of a lot of the fixed overhead of the economy,
Yeah.
keeping track of all this
That's
stuff
true.
and
That's a
doing
good. So
all
if
this
you,
game
it's
playing.
not just about bringing in more; it's minus expenses too. That's a good point.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I don't blame, I mean, international people like Apple. I mean, they've
Mhm.
got headquarters in Europe, they got headquarters in
Right.
the Far East, they got
Right.
headquarters in the United States, they got multiple corporations that Apple probably owns, and they spend probably considerable efforts to try to minimize the
Just
taxes that they have
avoid.
to pay
Yep.
overall. And
Hmm.
it's their right to do that. I think
100%.
I would do it if I were them.
Me
I
too.
would encourage them to do it to keep their company strong and to keep all those employees happy and everything.
Right.
But the reason they have to spend so much time messing around with all that is because there's
The
such
government.
complicated tax law. If
Right.
every country of the world, let's say, all decided, let's charge 20% of revenues,
Yeah.
we have a worldwide flat tax at the
Yeah.
same rate,
Yeah.
all of this would go away.
All of it.
There would, all of it.
But more importantly, which I think a lot of people don't like, I wasn't initially thinking about, is that not only are you going to then generate either the same or more, but you will lower expenses. Tom, you and me should run
You'll generate,
2024.
no, 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 no.
But no,
I
the tax conversation is always interesting because I think, like you said, it does go very, very far back, and it does almost go against like an un-American idea. You know what I mean? It almost is. Now, I think paying fair taxes, if it's used appropriately, like just the way that the money is spent, like that. I mean, how many of us pay taxes to build one Tomahawk missile? You know what I mean? And then what does that be? So it's it could be restructured in so many different ways. But I think we're kind of going through not a tax restructure right now, but just a somewhat of a new revolution now. You know what I mean? You see more digital
yeah,
money now than ever. You see more people working from home now than ever. There is a digital revolution that we're living through. And that's why it's
we are.
always good to talk with people like yourself, because you bring a lot of experience to the table. And that's also why I'm excited to get into this book when it comes out at the end of March.
Yeah.
So other than the book in 2021, do you have anything else exciting? I know you said you have a speech with some people in Kenya coming up. That's exciting. That's pretty
Yeah,
dope.
that's going to be interesting. I've never done one to Kenya before. I did two this last year to Singapore for some
That's cool.
strange reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey,
Two different
Singapore's got a lot of people,
operations.
a lot of money there.
Yeah. And we're talking about trying to do a seminar with Lawrence Bensdorp, who's a great
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
trader. He's an expert on multiple systems trading, and he wrote a great book,
Yeah, yeah.
"Automating Your Stock Portfolio." Is a wonderful book
Yep.
on the logic and sort of the mental framework behind getting to trading on one universe, say stocks, multiple strategies that do everything from, in one case, trend follow, to another case, mean reversion,
Hmm.
to another case, hedge your portfolio and for a catastrophic hedge. Lots of different focuses on what the objective for each of those strategies are, and how to think of it in terms of you're the guy that's running all this thing.
Interesting.
And he does a great job. He trades personally 50 different trading strategies simultaneously, and
Wow.
almost
He
doesn't.
must be half robot.
He's got a lot of programming involved in that, but
Yeah. So when are you
uh,
thinking about doing the seminar? Do you have a month or a place in mind
well,
yet?
we've been kicking around April. The
Nice.
problem is we just got back from Vegas, and we were checking out the Four Seasons executive boardroom, which is where we were going to hold it. And we wanted to
Yeah.
have 12 people in there, and that's all it'll hold, 12
Yeah.
plus the three of
Yeah.
us, my
Yeah.
wife, Lawrence, and myself. And we love the room. It is absolutely over the top, beautiful, and gorgeous. It suits us perfectly. And the last time we held a seminar there, it was just a great experience for everybody, I think. Um, they'll only let 6 people in the room now.
Oh,
That's
half occupancy.
not going
Come
to
to
make the
Florida.
seminar
Listen,
work.
I'm doing one in 2 weeks in January. I have 12 people coming to Florida. Come to Florida.
Yeah, we might have to look at that.
Yeah.
The other thing is we were going to the appointment. This was 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, right in the middle of the week,
Okay.
and we had to pull off I-15 and get down into the Strip.
Hmm.
So we got down on the Strip. I took a right turn to drive south, about 10 casinos or so, to get to the Four Seasons valet parking. And we saw one older gentleman walking by himself on the west side sidewalk that entire
That's
distance
crazy.
on a
Just dead.
Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock.
Dead.
Deader than a doornail.
Does that make
It
you
is.
think maybe, is that what you're saying? Maybe you don't want to do it yet because you're thinking it's still kind of dead there?
Well, if it's dead, it's dead for a number of reasons. It's dead potentially because the Nevada governor has decided to make everything restrictive. It's also dead because the casinos realize there are big times around the weekend. So if
Right.
anybody's going to be comfortable with leaving their home and going out into a sort of dead casino, they might do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but they might not do it Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock.
Right.
And some conferences that bring in all that huge traffic, like the entire dental uh, industry meets there, or the
Sure.
AMA
Sure.
meets there, or you get the electronics show, which takes up every casino and every hotel in the entire city.
Yeah.
Those can't even organize those. They're not allowed. I
Wow.
mean, by law or by decree of the
Decree or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
by decree of the governor. I hesitate to say law because law should say that they have the right to assemble,
Right.
but Constitution. But yeah, the governor
That
is
sucks,
saying no,
man.
no, no, you can't do it. So what ends up happening is it's so dead that we don't want to do this if people. Then the other side of it is the people coming to the seminar. Let's say you're a potential
Yeah, I don't want to
trader,
come to
and
yeah,
you
I don't want
say,
to come to boring, Vegas when it's dead. Right.
or you might even be afraid.
Right.
Or your wife.
Right.
Your wife might say, "Oh, I don't know, Austin. This COVID's not over yet. I think we shouldn't get on a plane. We should
Sure.
just
Sure.
hunker down. Why don't you try to catch the next seminar?" So we don't want to hold a seminar if our attendees don't want to come. We don't want to hold a seminar if the place that we're trying to hold it at almost doesn't seem to want us there. And
Right.
we don't want to
Seriously.
hold it in a city that's like deader than a doornail, has a lot less planes coming in and out than it used to. And I don't know. So
Well,
we're kind of
listen,
penciling in
I'm
some dates and just kind of taking a wait and see attitude. I mean, I'm ready to go. If you told me I had to be there next week, it's no big
you're
deal
ready
to
to
me.
roll. Right.
I just get in the car and drive over to Las Vegas. It's 5 hours from here, so
That's not bad. Well,
no
listen,
big deal for me.
if you guys are serious about making it happen, you should definitely look into Florida and Texas and keep me posted, keep Twitter posted, because I know I and along with a lot of other people would fight for those 12 seats because I think that it'd be an awesome experience to talk with you and Lawrence. You
Well,
guys
then
both.
we'd have to worry about what city in Florida and what city in Texas, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, you don't have too many options in Texas. It's either Dallas
no,
or Austin or Houston. That's really it. You know what I'm
it'd
saying? And
probably
in
be
Florida,
Dallas.
you're doing
Yeah,
Tampa or you're doing Miami. That's really it. Orlando is good, but it's in the center of the state. You got to come to the beach. You know what I mean? You got to see the water. You got to feel the whole thing. You got to get the toes in your sand. But listen, Tom, I've kept you for an hour. This has been
that's
awesome.
okay.
I'm looking forward to everything that you're bringing in 2021. And I'm serious. Let me know if I can do anything to help you get that event, make it happen here in Florida.
It
I'd
was
love
a,
to be there
it
and
was
I'd
a
love to help.
pleasure talking to you, and thanks for the offer. I'll keep it in mind.
Always. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next video.